I am Joey Bondok, Head of Research at Colliers International Philippines. Welcome to another episode of Colliers Insights podcast. And the industrial and logistics segment is a property sector that has experienced relative stability despite the pandemic and lockdown induced economic delays. Now, to help me understand how the segment performed during the pandemic with me today are my colleagues from the Capital Markets and Investment Services team, Calvin Havinyar. Hi, Calvin.
Hello, hi Joey. Good morning.
Hello. And Matt De Lima. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Joey. Good morning.
So during the pandemic and imposition of lockdowns across the country, we have seen a ramped up demand for logistics facilities, warehouses, standard factory buildings, and industrial facilities across the country. Of course, this was facilitated by a lockdown economy, a consumption-driven economy. But Calvin, I want to pick your brains. Can you provide insights on how the sector performed prior to the pandemic?
Actually, prior to the pandemic, Joey, logistics demand has always been increasing, and we've seen rapid growth in terms of the logistics sector. This is mainly brought about by the very strong retail sector, and increasing consumer demand, particularly in food supply and manufacturing. This is essentially to cater to the increasing demand of the population in urban areas. So as population increased, uh, logistics also increased within the urban areas. We've also seen the rise of the e-commerce sector pre-pandemic, and that has contributed a lot to the growth of this sector.
Okay. Matt, would you like to add a few points on how the sector performed pre-pandemic?
Yeah. As Calvin have mentioned, the growth was primarily driven by the consumer goods. If you looked at the previous years, the focus was primarily in Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas, the usual locations where logistics players go to. Before the pandemic hit, you'll see these companies who's venturing into logistics or even FMCGs also expanding in the north. So that's the trend that we've seen pre-pandemic.
So obviously there has been a stable demand even prior to the pandemic. But as we know, pandemic struck and it disrupted how manufacturers, how industrial players do business in the country. So how has the pandemic and the ensuing imposition of lockdowns affected the demand for these warehouses and industrial and other industrial facilities, Calvin?
Good question, Joey. Actually, what the lockdown contributed to the logistics sector in the short run, at least for the first 3 months of the imposition of the enhanced community quarantine, we've really seen a big spike in terms of demand on warehousing and warehousing space. Uh, Most of the demand came from manufacturing companies that has a lot of overflowing supply and stock, which they don't know where to put because they could not move these goods. Uh, we've seen that also in the automobile industry. So a lot of their stocks, just because they could not roll out their vehicles, they would be needing more spaces for them. We've also seen it happen for fast-moving consumer goods, and they compose mainly of the increase in demand in the short run during the lockdown. But we've seen it stabilize, demand stabilize by around the September 2020. As soon as the economy slowly opens up, uh, the demand also for additional spaces have lessened. Just to
Okay.
add, Jovia,
Yep. Sure.
these short run demand for warehouses was just for like 6 months to a year.
Okay. But do you see this demand for, warehouses and other similar facilities for the long haul, or do you just see this demand surging because of the pandemic and the lockdown imposed all over the country? I'll ask Calvin first, and then Matt can add a few points later.
As mentioned earlier, Joey, even before the pandemic, we've already seen the demand increasing, and that momentum has been continuing. And it will, I project it to continue for the next 2 to 5 years, um, as more and more uh, uh, as consumerism still continue to increase in the country. If you'll notice, Joey, even after the pandemic, uh, people still consume. So consumers still
Yeah.
buy, albeit in a different platform.
Yep.
And whatever the case is, logistics is needed for it.
Yeah. Matt, other insights on what has been driving this demand during this lockdown?
Yeah, Joey. During this lockdown, when people started working from home, everyone was practically just going from home to supermarket or the palenques, the normal markets. I would say that the demand came from the food and consumer products. You've seen alcohol, aside from the basic food. There's the spike of demand for those kinds of products. So, yeah.
Okay, so I know that you've been speaking to a lot of developers, landlords, companies here in the Philippines that are engaged in the development of warehouses. But how should the developers of warehouses or other industrial parks facilities, for example, capture the demand in the market? What would you recommend to the players in the industrial and logistics sector for them to be able to further tap opportunities in the logistics sector? So, Calvin?
Yeah, this is interesting, Joey, because for the longest time, the warehouse leasing business was dominated by traditional warehouse developers. So these are the small developers or the high net worth families that owns portfolio of warehouses across the country. And for the longest time, they have been dominating, and they have thrived definitely during the lockdown. I think yung vacancy nila was close to 0%. Uh,
I agree. I agree. You also monitor vacancies in the market. Yeah.
Correct. But now we're seeing the national developers, the big developers, already entering into the warehouse leasing market. We've seen this happen even before the pandemic hit. One of the foremost developers is Ayala, actually,
Yep.
with their industrial parks in Cavite. So, and I see that particular trend of national developers, big developers entering into the warehouse leasing to continue. And other developers would follow what Ayala is doing in terms of warehouse leasing. I think one of the reason for the big developers to do it is for the cash flow, and it is a possible entry to increase their REIT portfolio in the future,
Yep.
if ever they can
Very,
continue.
very good point. As warehousing business is a very good source of recurring income, right? But it's interesting that Calvin highlighted the Ayala plan of further expanding facilities in Southern Luzon. But Matt, do you see similar plans from other developers for their facilities northern central part of Luzon? And do you see similar opportunities moving forward?
Yes, it is, Joey. The Northern Luzon infrastructure has been ramping up in the past few years. And the consumer goods, the population, general population in Luzon, Northern Luzon, is increasing. The spending capabilities of the consumers are increasing, before the pandemic, and now it's still increasing, I would say. um, Definitely there are some developers that we see increasing their industrial portfolio in the north. You'll see focusing in Tarlac and
Yep.
Pampanga,
Yeah.
even as far as Bataan.
Mm.
because of there are two primarily the primary drivers for this. Probably it's because of the Clark Airport. There's also the Subic Gateway for the cargo and shipments. So there's a lot of opportunities in the north as well.
I agree, and that the development of the infrastructure network in northern and central Luzon only bodes well for the logistics center.
Correct.
For in northern and central Luzon, we're very excited with the
Yes.
modernization of the Clark Airport. You have the Skyway 3 recently opening, and there are other key crucial projects in the pipeline that will be completed beyond 2022. So we've talked about the macroeconomy, the consumer lockdown-driven economy. Now I want to delve into specifics, and of course, Matt here has of course, assisted a lot of clients, both developers and locators. So, can you walk us through, Matt, as to how you've assisted your clients, both landlords and locators, the actual users of these industrial facilities and warehouses? I want to understand the specifics of how you assisted them so that our viewers can also get a glimpse of what Colliers does for its clients, both landlords as well as the locators.
Okay. First, before the pandemic, during the pandemic, we've seen a lot of locators expanding, even with the pandemic. Um, my advice more is among the landlords, given these locators' preference where to locate. We could advise we had advised the landlords which locations are the primary key market for these clients, especially the e-commerce and the e-commerce related companies, the parcel deliveries. At the same time, what are the specs? What are the specs of the warehouses that they're looking at? So is it about in terms of square meter covered area, the capability to accommodate riders, because the trend right now for e-commerce, there's a lot of bikes, motorbikes. At any given time, maybe you can expect 2,000 motorbikes. So that is practically very crucial for 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 landlords and for locators to have a cohesive operations. Um, it's more on what are these locators looking for. Um, Loading docks, dock levelers. Um, you'll be seeing locators asking for a ramp for forklifts, and ventilation. When you go inside a sorting out facility of last mile hub, ventilation is also key. Imagine maybe 50, 20, 50 workers sorting out the purchased goods in the facility. So ventilation and lighting is very key. And uh, yeah, so mostly it's more of what the locators are looking for
Yep.
in terms of facility. Where are they going, and what are they looking for? So these are potential for landlords.
Okay. So my key takeaway from what Matt mentioned is that the traditional warehouse setting just won't cut it, right? In terms of what the locators require at this point, it's a matter of the supply meeting the demand, what the locators
Correct.
want to be able to reach last mile deliveries and to be more aggressive in this very competitive and cutthroat logistics sector. Now, I want to ask Calvin. Of course, Calvin has provided advice to a lot of developers, the builders of warehouses, and other logistics facilities across the country. What other advice can you give, Calvin, to your clients so that they'll be able to maximize opportunities in a very competitive segment such as the logistics sector?
Yeah. Opportunities abound right now when it comes to industrial and logistics and utilization of land. Uh, I think there are trends that developers and landlords should consider moving forward. One thing is cold storage. I think cold storage would play a relevant part in terms of logistics and industrial development. Uh, right now, with the COVID vaccine coming in, there will be a lot of need for cold storages. Not only for the vaccine but also food supply. So those are relevant products that would be needing cold storages. Second one would be self storages in city. Uh, that has been a trend that's been going on ever since for the last 5 years. So that is something that I think landowners and developers should consider in terms of building in city logistics facilities. And of course, we've mentioned earlier fulfillment centers and close to the urban areas, logistics hub. I think those are key development concepts moving forward. And for the landlords, they should also start. We can help them actually connect them to the right people who wants to go on to lease warehouse facilities. One trend that we're seeing that's going to continue would be doing build to suit projects for logistics companies and manufacturing companies, and that is a good opportunity for landlords actually because it is like pre-leasing when you think about it, Joey. So they get to have a secured tenant able to pay for the next 7 to 10 years. So that's secured income. That can be a good yield play for the landowner and essentially minimizing their risk. And build to suit development can also be financed by the banks. So it's a good way to take advantage of the still low interest rate environment.
Great. Very concrete recommendations and insights from my colleagues from CMIS, Calvin and Matt. Perhaps just to summarize and what we see moving forward for this segment, can you share a few insights over the next 3 to 5 years, even beyond the pandemic? What do we see for the industrial and logistics sector? I'll start with Matt.
Yep. First and foremost, since we are geographically we are a fragmented country, we've seen the rampant surge of e-commerce in the Philippines, um, and it was tested during the pandemic and has been proven during the pandemic. The next will be, where will they go? Will they increase in Visayas? Will they increase in Mindanao? So in terms of industrial, definitely there will be take up of warehousing space, primarily driven by e-commerce, and next to it is the FMCG. These two industries will take on the warehousing and logistics business into next level industry in the next maybe 2 3 years from now. So it will be an interesting play for developers. They should be keen on strategic locations for key growth centers for these types of companies. So the likes of maybe Cebu, Davao, CDO. Apart from in the north, you'll see Tarlac, Pampanga, even Bataan. So yeah, in terms of expansion, it's I would say it's a bright future for Philippines because it will still increase later on.
Thanks, Matt. Exciting prospects for the logistics sector moving forward. For Calvin, maybe to encapsulate what you've discussed and share a few insights on what you see for the logistics sector moving forward, perhaps post-pandemic.
Well, I agree with everyone. Logistics will continue to grow. Even if COVID did not happen, the demand for logistics spaces, for warehouses space has always been increasing and always been an uptrend. And I think the trend will continue for a long time. However, the sustainability of the growth of the industrial real estate sector in general, I still feel heavily rely on our ability to be able to attract domestic and global manufacturing companies. So that has always been the key driver for industrial real estate. So companies, manufacturing companies such as electronics, automobiles, assembly plants, large pharmaceuticals, and other industries, we should be able to attract them, go into our country and invest. I mean, we've already lost a lot of opportunities to Vietnam following the exodus from China. And at that time, we are just not prepared to accommodate these companies to come in. I guess for this to happen, Joey, we really need to have a stable and fair incentive program, especially for global locators and global players, and a very transparent tax regime as well. Uh, I also believe that PESA would be playing an important part in the growth of the industrial sector, especially on industrial real estate. And if they continue their best practices uh, and make it easy for foreign companies to do business here in the Philippines, then that will be a great help to the industry.
Thank you. Thanks, Calvin. Very interesting insights from my colleagues from the Capital Markets and Investment Services team. Again, thank you, Matt De Lima, and of course, Calvin Haviniar for sharing your insights and what you see for the logistics sector moving forward. So that concludes the second episode of Collier's Expert Insights podcast. Now, if you want to learn more, please download our latest report on the industrial sector that's capturing warehousing boom. And if you want to learn more about Collier's latest reports, please check our social media sites. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And do check our website that is www.colliers.com.